Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Som TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. I am honored that you are spending time with me here. On today's show, I have the very lovely Erin DiCostanzo. Her and her husband make wine in Napa Valley. One of the last true great bargains in Napa Valley from like a quality standpoint and a price standpoint. It's great stuff. They're also on the Blind Tasting Sessions episode that is live now on Som TV, which is this whole season is husband and wives or spouses, or it's very funny and very cute. And these two, you're going to want to hug them after you watch the episode. Also, I want to say that as we keep reflecting on Steven Spurrier and his recent passing, I can't tell you guys how many things I keep unearthing that we have coming and all of the moments that we've all spent together. We have something amazing coming in the coming days, which is a live watch with Steven that I did watching the movie Bottle Shock with him. So it's kind of like watch the movie with the real Steven Spurrier. I originally had done this as a sort of a pre-production interview and research for the Judgment of Paris film that I have coming this summer that I directed. And sort of in the process, I said, hey, can we watch this movie together? And it turns out it's only the second time he's ever even seen it. I mean, he hates the film. So we watched this, and it's not what you expect. He does not complain the whole time. He actually has a great time. We laugh very hard. Steven was a dear friend, and I think you're going to see that come out in this. But I strongly recommend, if you want to learn the true story, but also see what a generous and wonderful person this guy was and what an amazing teacher, you need to watch the Bottle Shock live watch coming in the coming days to SomTV.com. All right, without further ado, my friend Erin DiCostanzo. Her first time on the Som TV podcast. Man, what an honor for you, Erin.
My first podcast anywhere. So yeah, the honor for me. I'm blushing.
I was joking, by the way. This is an honor for me, not for you.
I know.
Really, you've never done a podcast, huh?
No, I don't think so. I listen to them all the time. So I was excited to finally join the medium.
Well, this is lovely. Okay, well, I want to introduce you the best I can. Okay. You grew up in a 10-generation Alaskan winemaking family.
Oh,
Is that correct?
Alaskan, yes. Wine, no. Wine was not at all a part of my Alaskan upbringing, although there was a time my dad was friends with somebody that owned a bar, right? And then the bar went out of business. And there was a time that there was like all this inventory from the bar that was stored in our garage. And I think by the time high school rolled around, I discovered some like wine there in the garage, and maybe we tried it. My older siblings, had already gotten to it first. So then my dad at one point was like, "Congratulations, kids! You guys finished the inventory."
You drank an entire bar worth of garage alcohol. Congratulations!
It may not have been as much as I originally thought, but yeah, that was the very highbrow intro to wine for me. Up in Anchorage, Alaska in the 90s. And then I did grow up in Anchorage, and it is home, but I figured Napa is actually going to be my forever home.
Oh, I would assume. I mean, now obviously you and your husband make, up to this point, it's been, I want the listeners to understand kind of who you are. I urge all of you to go onto SomTV.com or go on the app on your favorite device and watch their blind tasting session. I mean, it is like, we met you, God, I want to say, was it sort of the beginning of COVID or around that time?
Like we were supposed to meet during the LMU fire.
Yep.
And then
that's right, the LMU fire.
Then there was the glass fire. So right around there is where I got to meet you. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we did a little recording for a special tasting that we were honored to be a part of. Which is also on Som TV.
Yep. There are a wine tasting of your two wines. And that's actually a good place to actually learn and see what you make and what it tastes like. But okay, so you and your husband Massimo, who by the way has the coolest name, Massimo DiCostanzo.
Massimo Vincenzo DiCostanzo. It's really
Massimo Vincenzo DiCostanzo. I think there was a character in Godfather 2 named that.
Better than
Godfather
Godfather 3.
Shake your hands. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We did. We met here in Napa Valley.
Yeah. So it's a small world up there, and it's kind of great that you two were able to meet each other. You know, and your story, I won't say what your story is because it's in the blind tasting sessions, which people should watch.
Indeed, we met up here, and actually, I had met him. I don't think I said this in the other episode, but I met him, and then he was gone for a few months, and I was definitely like, this town is small enough that you notice when like that person you enjoy noticing is not there anymore. And he had taken kind of a sabbatical and went back to Italy for a few months. And I just sort of noticed that
that probably means he did a hit and he had to go hide out. That's what that, I don't know if you've seen movies before.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, he was busy in Sicily. No, he was in Florence, living with some friends, and he's got a bunch of cousins in and around Tuscany. And then I noticed when he came back into town, I was like, well, there's that guy again. We had these Friday night wine tastings at the store I used to work at, Acme. And my coworker at the time was like, Erin, you're like wearing dresses on Fridays and like heels. Anybody you're expecting to come show up?
This was all a fishing lure or what? Like you don't normally dress like that?
No, I was definitely... somebody had started showing up on these Fridays and I was like, oh... I put a little effort into it. And yeah, my coworker...
People listening to this pod can't understand how cute these two are. You guys are freaking adorable. It's ridiculous. It's like couple goals type stuff. All right. So let's take this into, you two do something that I don't know if listeners understand how hard, maybe it's not hard for you. Maybe it's just naturally you guys are gifted. But for you two to decide to make your own label and to make your own wine and to source your own grapes in a place like Napa Valley, which is expensive. I mean, the land's expensive.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what it's like and what the scale is that you make wine? So how much do you make and what is it like to do it amongst the big boys and girls in Napa?
Yeah. Well, the scale started super small and we started with, well, actually Massimo laid the groundwork before he and I even met. So essentially like the short version is we had day jobs for a long time to help support this endeavor. And it started quite a long time ago and built so slowly. So in 2008, Massimo procured a couple of tons of Cabernet Sauvignon from a single vineyard here in St. Helena. And at the time, wasn't quite sure what it was going to be, but he had that goal and that desire to make his own label. I knew he needed to start something. And then again in 2009, he sourced two different Cabernets, a block from Oakville, kind of close to Martha's Vineyard there on that beautiful western stretch of Oakville. And then a parcel from the Sleeping Lady Vineyard in Yountville, which has now become quite a beautifully well-known site. But at the time, I had never even heard of it. It was a beautiful tiny parcel. So the groundwork was...
a great name.
The Sleeping Lady.
The Sleeping Lady.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of wonderful producers are now vineyard designating that wine, Zeitgeist and Julian Fayard. So it's worth seeking out. So we made a tiny amount of wine from that vineyard in 2009. And actually, that's right when Massimo and I met. And, like what a great way to woo a girlfriend. He was like, well, you want to come pick some grapes with me this morning? And I was like, so charmed. And I went out there and realized how incredibly talentless I am at picking grapes and how slow it was for me to pick the tiny amount. But the project started in earnest in 2010 when Massimo started connecting with Tom Farella and the Farella Vineyard. And that is in Coombsville. It wasn't even an AVA at the time. So there we started in earnest. We scrapped that 2008. We scrapped that 2009. Basically, we sold it as Shiners and then started the brand in earnest with just 100 cases.
Let's take one step back. What does that mean, Shiners? Because that is one of these terms that I think if you're in winemaking, you throw around all the time, but to the general wine drinker, they don't know what a Shiner is. So when you say you sold something...
Yeah, a Shiner is a wine that's in bottle with a cork, but does not have a label on it. So Massimo made these wines and bottled them, but we were still in this really abstract label design process. And he had some amazing, Massimo's such an artist. We don't have the artistic skill to create a wine label, but he's got that creativity and that his mind is always buzzing. So he had everything from these cool, old mosaic pictures that were unearthed in Pompeii that were inspiring a label to some really cool old etchings from this Florentine bookstore that was inspiring to him too. So we were just in the really early stages of dreaming up a label design. And then in 2009, 2010, Massimo started working at the Farella Vineyard. So I should back up. He started custom crushing those 08 and those 9s at the Farella Winery. So Tom Farella of Farella Vineyard had a little space in the winery. Coombsville's not even an AVA yet at this time. And for a young winemaker to be able to find space inside a winery and work there at the same time is a pretty beautiful deal. So Massimo got to work alongside Tom, help make those beautiful Farella Vineyard wines, which I just adore, and at the same time, make a little wine in the space. So that is step one to how do you afford to make wine in Napa Valley? It
sounds like a lot of positioning yourself for luck though too. It's not, luck is always, you don't just get it. It's not a gift. You're ready for it kind of thing. But
yeah, right. For sure. I mean, you have to make smart choices that put you in the right place so that when opportunity comes, you can say yes quickly.
But I guess my question is, it's still difficult. Why not go up to Mendocino? Why not make wine from Livermore? Why get grapes from a place? Is it so you can say Napa? Is it because the grapes are genuinely better there? What was the reason to go through the hassle? And I'm sure hindsight's 2020 for you on this question, but why for him? And I know you're not technically the winemaker, but I'm sure you're involved in every step.
Well, it's a little bit like the reason why I moved to Napa. If you want to come to wine country, there are absolutely gorgeous places all around the planet that are both known for making world-class wines, but also wonderful places to live. And that's a huge part of it for us too. Living in Napa Valley is extremely, except for smoke and fire events, it's an incredibly beautiful way of life here in terms of proximity to beautiful food, wine, and lifestyle and weather. So living in Napa Valley, like, no question, this is part of why we wanted to be here. But then also Napa, this is one of the world-class wine growing regions. And what it does best is Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think that, Massimo and I both, we on purpose did not start off making maybe some Mendocino Carignan or some, Sonoma. I don't know. So we just wanted to come out with what we thought was like the best varietal made in the best region. And that's Cabernet Sauvignon. And we really wanted to play at that level. And, both of us kind of had Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa deep in our early careers. So Massimo had, after Davis, an early job for him was working up at Ovid. He always says they hadn't even poured the crush pad yet. This is 2005. And then from there, worked abroad at some pretty magnificent places. But Andy Erickson and his partnership with Massimo brought him down to Screaming Eagle in Oakville, and he partnered with Philippe Milka at Atelier Milka after that. So we're working with some pretty top tier Napa Cabernet. So that's what he knows how to make it and knows what it takes to, I think, really showcase that varietal at best and how well it does here in this amazing 30-mile valley. And then my background as well, I was working as a sommelier in New York City and then here in St. Helena at steakhouses. So this is like, I was swimming in Cabernet every night.
Right in the zone, Cabernet all the time. Yeah.
And it was my absolute sweet spot and a passion. So while we do drink a lot of other wines, I think we just knew that we wanted to we didn't want to start, which would have been a smarter idea for cash flow if we had perhaps started with a couple of vintages of some
cash flow. What's cash flow?
If we had started with maybe a couple vintages of a white wine and turn that around quickly and build up some cash that way, you make Cabernet Sauvignon, you're sitting on it for years many years.
So I know you work to sell the stuff. And again, the reason I'm having a conversation with Aaron on this pod is that there is just, within Napa, there are a lot of smaller producers. I'm not trying to say it's only like the big houses and stuff, but it is something that in my decade or so of being peripherally around the wine business, I really admire. I sort of look at you guys, Steve Mathiasen and Jill Mathiasen have been all of our content. I really respect them. They're now good friends. They're in all my films. I sort of look at you guys in a way that they were, they come more from an agriculture background before, but I love the idea that there are still people starting from where you both started. And I'm sure where you guys end up and you're going to have all sorts of decisions to make along the way and blah, blah, blah. But so you sell the stuff according to you in the blind tasting sessions. He makes the wine, you sell the stuff. And I talked to him privately when we were filming. He says you're quite good at it. How the hell do you get noticed? I mean, when there's Stag's Leap wine and there's, Clos du Val and all these wineries everyone knows by name for reasons, how do you stand out?
Well, anyway, that comparison to Steve and Jill is like beyond humbling and really awesome because I too really admire what they're doing. And I think part of their well-deserved like success is that people like that personal story. This is a family business. And I say mom and pop, and sometimes people say like, well, that's like, don't short sell yourself. You guys are more than like a mom and pop. But I don't mean that we're like a shack on a roadside mom and pop. I mean that.
Yeah, but you guys are a mom and a pop.
Yeah, I'm literally a mom. He's a pop. We have a family, and we are the only two employees of this business. And I don't say that like in a demeaning way. And same with Steve and Jill. Like it's a partnership that is the backbone of Di Costanzo. And how do you get noticed? I mean, I think what we found, and I mean to reference this last year, what we heard from one of our distributors in the Chicago area, I said thank you to them for supporting us during this crazy year. And he replied with something like, it's been in a year where we can't visit accounts and they couldn't go pour the wine and dazzle them with, I don't know, slideshows or whatever they need to do to sell the wine. They said the story
just out of curiosity, have you ever been dazzled by a slideshow?
Oh my God, I love them. PowerPoint.
Yeah, right. Oh man,
Glorious.
so sexy. Oh God, okay.
But they said, like, when all there is to the story to carry the wine, you guys have that. And there is a personal touch, and that can maybe go a lot farther than a larger, more established winery. So in that sense, it was our advantage to have a more personal brand. And how do we get noticed? It's been a journey, but I think, okay, honestly, in the very early stages when we were just building a list, did I mention the fact that Massimo worked at Screaming Eagle like a lot more than I do now? I did. Because if you just have like that 30-second elevator pitch to get somebody to pay attention to your brand, like you'll just throw out a couple of fireworks. And I don't really mention that so much any longer. Number one, it was a long time ago. And my career as a sommelier, like, let's be honest, that was a long time ago too. We've been doing this for longer than we've been doing those jobs. However, sometimes if I just need to get in those early days, that would get people to be like, oh, okay, I'm listening. Now what do you got? Another way that we got noticed too is, we were sourcing from Coombsville. We started with the Farella Vineyard, and for many, many years, that was the only wine that we made. And the Farella Vineyard is, to me, like, one of the absolute jewels of one of my favorite AVAs. And so Coombsville didn't become an AVA until 2011. And so a lot of young somms were still just kind of even learning, maybe if they took their wine classes a couple years prior, it wasn't on the maps that they memorized. But we knew that region had potential. And so as the news of the AVA's creation got out and people were learning more about it, there we were as an example of a small production, high quality wine coming from that region. And so that really helped as well. We were a part of that discussion and that conversation, and really proud to be so.
That's great. This is endlessly fascinating to me because it's an endurance game, to be a winemaker, to continue to make a wine and to make your own label. Couldn't you guys have made a hell of a lot more money for him to just continue being a winemaker for somebody else? Why do this? I think it's important for the listeners to understand this process, because this is part of what's in your glass, is that people have made some of these decisions to... It's a bigger fork in the road than I think people realize.
So I had my day job running a wine retail company until just a couple of years ago. And that definitely helped us have that stability to grow this brand on the side. But yeah, it's true. Like, so could Massimo have had consulting jobs along the side while we're building this brand? Yes, possibly. But there are also consulting positions that don't want you to have another project in the works, which would immediately conflict with what you're making. It's not true for everybody, but we definitely have had friends who, when they got their consulting job or their in-house winemaking job, they did have to shutter their personal project. And that was just not something that we wanted to do. The name Di Costanzo is on the label. That should tell you right away that this isn't like a brand that we're building to sell, right? Like in Napa, a lot of times they say you sell your land or you sell your brand in order to make your fortune. But we named our wine Di Costanzo, so it'd be kind of hard to sell it. And we knew that.
I don't know, the Mondavis would beg to differ, but keep going.
Oh, God. Yeah, well, we knew that this was always going to be our personal project and hands-on, and something that we would be devoting a lot of time to. So, oh my gosh, yeah. So if you have other ideas where we can make lots of money, I'll take them. So go. It's not to say that we don't want that too.
I would say the worst.
Should I start a streaming service? Is that
no? Do not. The worst idea you could possibly have is to ask a documentary filmmaker how to make money, because that person, whatever their answer is, will drive you into ruin.
Okay,
so
cool.
just giving you a heads up.
But it's been slow. Exactly. And so I am not a slow, patient person. I am very much a more kinetic, a little more like instant gratification needing sort of a person.
This is why you're great at selling. I mean, you guys are a great team. So my wife, Christina, who is, I should probably introduce her more as the producer and writer of the Somm films and everything else before my wife, but we are married. We work together. What is it like for you working with your husband?
It's not without its challenges, but it's the best job I've ever had.
What are the challenges? We can have a conversation together.
You will probably have the same challenges, like, not talking about work at 11 o'clock at night in bed. Nobody likes to do that, but sometimes with the two kids in the day, you still literally have to ask.
We find our sex life to be incredible because we're talking about work at 11 p.m. in bed. It's really gets us going. It's really great. So I don't know if it's like that for you.
You get it. Yeah, that's of course that stuff that's already known that anyone might imagine, that separation of church and state and keeping, your work life separate from your marriage. I would say because we work together, we answer to each other, and we're able to spend. Everyone has spent a lot of time with their family this year, but Massimo and I, we truly we both of us like drop our kids off at school every day together. You know, we do spend, I would say, more time together than a lot of other couples get to. And I love it. You know, he seems to love it too. We really are able to.
Oh, he does. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's incredible the way you get to know a person, which has its pluses and minuses, but I would say it airs very high on the plus side. To be able to know a person as well as you can when you work with them.
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes back to when people would have a farm or have a store together, or, you really don't have a choice, it's,
but also like, don't you find too, when working with your partner, trust in a workplace is huge. Number one, I have like total trust with my partner in our marriage, in our job. And that's amazing. Like I can just completely relax in that I know he's making the best choices. I'm confident in his artistic choices. I am not a winemaker, but I have like full faith in the choices that he makes. And that's like a relief. I don't have to be like, oh, what is his intention here? Is this person like, I don't know. That is a joy and that brings comfort.
But it also, and this is in my case, and something I actually want to say is that it's easier to overstep boundaries though too. And sometimes I find with Christina, who is the best story mind I've ever met in my life, it's easy for me to forget that she deserves to be treated not as, my wife while we're talking about work.
Yeah,
and that's a challenge. But I also think because of that, though, we know each other in a way that, from a creative standpoint, and wine is creative. I know there's a lot of technical aspects, chemistry, and a lot of gut. There's a lot of gut to winemaking. There's a lot of gut to selling wine, and that is creative, in my opinion. Gut is spur of the moment decision. Same with making a film.
And you can just trust that they have like the chops to make those gut decisions. Yeah, I love also that Massimo, we have, again, he respects my writing, which is a big part of how we're selling, especially, we're not meeting with folks in person these days as much. So writing is something I love to do, and writing about wine has been my skill set in my jobs for the last 13, 14 years. So again, him just like saying, that's your strength, run with it. I don't have that strength. Yeah, it's been working nicely.
It's good to have lanes. It's a funny thing. Like if you see two actors, like an actor and an actress, or two actors who are in a relationship, you find that oftentimes the profession is too close and it's very hard to do. But the thing with Christina and I is, I direct or whatever the hell it is I do. I don't even know anymore. And she produces, and that might sound like a similar job, but there's very distinct lanes. And I think it's probably similar for you and Massimo. This stuff, again, the reason I'm having this conversation with you is that your wine is special for this reason. Your wine is not... I think, what was it, 9 a.m. when I tasted your wine? It was maybe 8:30 a.m. You came, did this tasting. I tasted your wine for the very first time. I looked at my cinematographer, Jackson. We went, shit, this is good. This wine's really good. Because, when you film, I'm going to sound like a pretentious snob with what I'm about to say, and I don't mean that, but it's still going to come off this way. You taste a lot of Napa Cab, and as you taste more and more wine, you're not actually... Good is not what you're looking for. You're looking for unique or different. Now, good has to exist in that, but that's a secondary characteristic to what I'm looking for when I taste wine. And so I find with a lot of Napa Cab, and I find this with a fair amount of Bordeaux's, I find it the regions that have the most, they're propped up by a lot of tradition and a lot of other things. A lot of the stuff tastes the same, and it's all of a very high quality. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a totally separate issue and a good issue. I find that a lot of Napa Cabs that you taste it and you go, this tastes expensive and well-made, but I don't know what else to say about it.
Totally.
So when we tasted your wine, and by the way, at a steakhouse or, I love to drink that stuff all day. But when you're drinking for conversation or you're with somebody and you're having an event or whatever, your wine had this immediate kind of light bulb situation that it was different in a comfortable place. It wasn't like, oh my God, it's 6% alcohol, wild stuff. This was straightforward, provincial from a place. It had the whole deal. And so that's, again, why you're on this pod, is that I think people should know your wine exists. What does your wine retail for? Hopefully we don't date the pod, because I'm sure this will change.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that very much. The Deco Cabernet Sauvignon right now is $65 a bottle. The Di Costanzo Cabernets range from $105 a bottle to $125 a bottle.
Which is like pretty straightforward par for a really nice reserve wine.
Single vineyard, 100% Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. And then we have one Sonoma Cabernet in the lineup. But I agree, I would say in terms of style, I think that what Massimo achieves so great is this Goldilocks style, where this is not, our Cabernet Sauvignon is not, again, 6% alcohol, like you said, like full of
well,
green.
as a former Somm or a current Somm, whatever you want to call yourself, you get the joke. I mean, it's
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, 1,000%, because I would encounter those wines where I would say, I appreciate that these folks are trying to prove a point and maybe pushing it a little farther than I think you need to say, we're not making a full-throated, full-bodied, overblown Cabernet Sauvignon. We're going to shift it really far this direction. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm not getting any pleasure out of this wine. And I understand what you're doing, but I'm not finding a wine that is
and the lees
joyful.
is only stirred by migratory birds.
Of
and,
course.
you know, and, you know.
Well, I had to
Yeah,
make
the whole deal.
I had a really early, like, influential moment as a young Somm, and I remember tasting a Cabernet Sauvignon that was so hyper green that my first taste of it was a sense memory of the Shakey's Pizza in Anchorage, Alaska, and a stewed tomato pizza pie with like green bell peppers on top. And I could see the like red banquettes and the red plastic oversized cups filled with like a suicide that I had made at the soda machine. And
Sounds like a $10 Chilean Carmenere to me. But
oh, yeah.
That's,
so in my mind, as a young Somm, I was like, well, I don't like that. So I don't like that flavor. And so I'm done with that category of Cabernet Sauvignon. Then I had to grow, develop like we all do. And I would see like, well, components of that are actually quite gorgeous when they're done in a balanced way. And so, yes, our wines sometimes have like a beautiful note of like some green herbaceousness to it, but it's a little bit more of like a softer sage, like a more easy style of a green note, along with the fruit characteristics that Cabernet Sauvignon can showcase when it's ripened, I think, properly. So in Coombsville, we were able to find site that you could see some of that cooler characteristics of Cabernet Sauvignon, along with the natural warmth that Napa is always going to give us. So Massimo had a vision of this, I'd say, a little more balanced style, which was right when people were looking to like, okay, I don't need it to be this extreme low end of the scale with really grippy and astringent. And also, I'm pretty tired of these overblown, over-oaked style of wines, too. So he found this niche that I think was, again, not trying to prove a point on being classic or old school, but just to him what was appropriate ripeness and appropriate style. And I'll be honest, so when we started selling these wines at the wine shop I used to work at, I wasn't sure that people were ready for this style. And I was a little bit nervous. And I don't even think
it sounds to me like the style that Napa made in the 70s.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And early, I mean, it doesn't sound that foreign of an idea. I mean, of course, you know, the wine business moves slow, but social media moves quick.
Yeah.
So
my day job, and I was like, I paid off my student loans by selling these Cabernets that were huge and expensive with lots of French oak and very juicy and really bold. And it tasted expensive. And people were like, well, listen, if I'm going to spend money on a wine, I surely want it to taste like I spent money on this wine. And so when we were selling this wine at the shop, I don't think I really even told Massimo how kind of nervous I was about the response. And this was a shop where most of the clients would buy wine without tasting it. It would just be on our recommendations, you know, email blasts. And the next morning we would get these voicemails as people would start to get their wines in the mail, and we'd check the voicemails in the morning. And I would hear like, that wine you sent me last night was so great. I loved it. You know, like send me 6 more bottles. And the audience response to that, I did not give the clientele enough credit and assume that just because somebody likes X doesn't mean they can't also like Y. And also, like, we weren't doing something that was that foreign or that weird. Like you're saying, that was the style of Cabernet that was very welcomed and lauded here for so long. We just feel it was an appropriate way to showcase, I think, what this valley can do so beautifully.
Oh, yeah. There's no question about it. I mean, that's why I brought the Mathiasens up, because Steve is a person that like looked at me early in my career. I'm still early in my career, but really earlier. And he goes, you wouldn't believe this, but Cabernet can have acid. Did you know that? I'm like, yeah. So when I tasted your wine, it has this kind of like drink it now or let it mellow type of a thing.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And also, you know, when we're talking about Napa Cab, I mean, the fact that your wine's $65, and
Yeah.
there are some people would go, wow, is that expensive? I don't really know. Other people would go, wow, that's insanely cheap for
a single
high
vineyard,
quality.
100% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's not purchased juice. It's not barrels that like didn't make the cut for a reserve. That was start to finish. And we wanted to be ready in case the economy tanked, to be honest. A while ago, we wanted to be able to
I would more say when the economy tanks rather than in case.
So that is an element as to why we wanted to make that wine deco at that lower price point. Additionally, you were talking about how do we get noticed? What if we could have a wine that could be served by the glass in nice restaurants? Or maybe someone tries that and then they're ready to graduate to the slightly higher price bottlings. And that's exactly what happened. Deco is still being poured by the glass at the French Laundry, and it was at 11 Madison Park. So it ended up filling that need for some really beautiful restaurants to say, okay, it's still $30-$40 a glass at those establishments, but that's not unheard of there. And then people have been so gracious enough to try it and call us and say, oh, well, what else do you guys make? So we were able to maybe suffer a little bit and not really charge as much for that wine as we ought to, but perhaps use it as a marketing tool, as a way to get our name out there. And it has worked. Now, Deco will probably evolve. So speaking about Napa and how sustainable is that wine right now is a single vineyard, 100% Cabernet from Napa Valley. I don't know if it will always be that way. Grape prices are astronomical. And if we were to access some other great vineyards, like maybe from Moon Mountain in Sonoma, or even just other vineyards in Napa, and blend it together to make a wine that's still a knockout, it probably won't be a single vineyard wine forever.
So anyway, so you're saying buy up all of your stuff now if you're a collector. Sounds good.
Definitely.
I like that.
Yeah. Back up the truck.
Let's plug your wine. Where can they get it? Where can they buy your wine?
Our website, hopefully by the time this airs, it will have a shiny new facelift, but it probably won't. It's mdcwines.com. And you register for our mailing list. And if wines are available, they'll be available for purchase on the site until they sell out. And we sell them by releases twice a year. So we just released the 2018 Farella Cabernet Sauvignon under the Di Costanzo label. And then the 2018 Montecillo. And that's where we do cross the border to Sonoma. And it's absolutely...
How dare you?
I know. Yeah. It's a happy place. So I love...
These borders were drawn by people who drew borders. I mean, there are parts of Sonoma that are very, similar. I mean, this, Knights Valley and all that stuff. But
yeah. You talk about Moon Mountain, and that's where we really start to get stars in our eyes. And it does have a little bit of like a Pritchard Hill in the 60s and 70s vibe over there in terms of elevation, aspect, soil type. But there aren't no... Ovids or Gandonas built over there.
It's just a different world. So everybody listening, go and check this out. Also, go to somtv.com and absolutely check out their blind tasting sessions, because I fully believe, part of the reason I do my job that I do in making these things is to tell these types of stories. The big houses have great stories, and I love those too, but you should support the people who are out there working hard, hustling, but also making the right stuff. Because this wine's good, I promise you. You can give it to your mom, you can drink it yourself. It's going to be good. Everybody's going to like it. So, all right. Well, it's great to have you on, Erin, and you're a good spokesperson. You did your husband well here.
Thank you, and I'm really proud. It's a lot easier to sell the wine when you like it. So.
As being a sommelier for so long, you have the authority to say that in a way that most people don't. So
I appreciate that.
It means a lot. And thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Bye, Erin.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please go to somtv.com. You can check out Erin's blind tasting session. And don't forget, we have the live watch coming with Steven Spurrier, not to mention, oh boy, lots and lots and lots of feature films. A new show called Behind the Glass that's coming, which will follow the season finale of Verticals. More Verticals episodes. SomTV.com, everybody. Please be safe and be nice to the person in your house. They've seen a lot of you this year. Okay, bye-bye.